Hi, I'm Case Lowe, co-host of the Open the Voice Gate podcast. The one question I'm constantly asked when it comes to Dragongate is how do I get into the promotion? Well, stop asking and start listening to the Open the Voice Gate podcast, released every Wednesday on the Voices of Wrestling podcasting network. For exclusive news and show reviews, look no further than the leader in Dragongate coverage, Open the Voice Gate.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling podcasting network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
To the highway in a brand new day. Over the rainbow, gotta let it go. So fast to freedom. Stars tonight together. Here everyone is singing. 你看到我就怕，头皮发麻，我的手。
Welcome back to Open the Voice Gate for January 21st, 2025. We are members of the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. You can find us on the Voices of Wrestling podcast feed or on our own dedicated Open the Voice Gate podcast feed on all podcast platforms and applications. You can follow us on social media at Open Voice Gate. If you'd like to donate to the show, click the link in the show notes. It'll take you to our redcircle.com landing site. You click the red boxes to sponsor this podcast and you set up a one-time or recurring donation. No obligation whatsoever, but we would like to thank our previous donors. I'm one of your hosts, it's your old pal, Mike Spears, joined alongside, as always, our co-host, Case Lowe. And Case, I guess we should just get right into the news that was teased today, shouldn't we?
It looks like Dragongate is coming back to America Wrestlemania Weekend. I think we both have nuggets of information. I don't think either of us have the full story. But,
right.
Mike, I give you the floor to, at the very least, share with people what you know, and I'll fill in the blanks with what I can after you're done.
So what I do know, what I'm willing to kind of report right now is it will be a Dragongate and at WrestleMania presence. We do not know what kind of site they are at. There is one that is floating around that looks awful convenient with the things that Case and I have heard over the last really 48 hours as where things have kind of become clear about this. It's something that because Dragongate has had this really busy January that we will be, after we get through this WrestleMania announcement, getting into the past week with 4 shows, 2 in Tokyo and 2 in Kobe. This did not get announced when they were originally planning to. So, and the fact that we just have this tease really announced from both President Keto and some others, and then also the news that Dragongate is going to have some wrestlers at Prestige Roseland 10 that's coming up on April 12th before WrestleMania weekend. All indications are that this is going to be a pretty large presence. From everything Case I have heard, I'd be willing to say that this would be the most significant Dragongate presence, even advertised or promoted, but since 2013 or 2012, I would say. And it seems like that the roster list, we kind of know 4 of them that I think we could publicly infer with the Roseland announcements: Suma Yokosuka, KZ, Ho-Ho Loon, and Ishin. You're getting to see it's not necessarily Dragon Kid and Yamato are the ones that are kind of being the first announcements. And the sense I've gotten with talking to people is that it might actually be skewing even younger than what you would think for Dragongate appearing at Mania weekend.
I'm super excited. You know, I was telling Mike beforehand that at this time last week, I got a DM from somebody saying that there was conversations about Dragongate stuff happening in Vegas, and I at that point did not know that Mania was in Vegas this year. So that was news to me. And over the course of the last week, I was like, oh, cool, Dragongate in Vegas. Oh, WrestleMania weekend's there. Awesome. Okay. I've talked to 3 different people within the Dragongate family about what is either going to be one show or two. The last time I talked to somebody about how many shows, it was still undecided if it was one show or two.
And the site that it looks like that they might be affiliated with has openings for multiple shows,
which is the West Coast Pro and Deadlock block of shows. Now, as somebody who, is now considering flying out to Vegas for this,
right?
which
Same.
again, last week was not on my radar at all. I would hope that they're linked up with those promotions. I think it would be very, very exciting if they were sharing the space with Deadlock and West Coast Pro. Deadlock and West Coast Pro, they've got the schedule for Thursday and Friday with openings on both of those days. The multiple people that I've talked to within Dragongate have listed Wednesday as a show date. So we'll see. I mean, there's a chance all of this is public by the time this episode comes out, and it's a moot point. I would hope that things got moved around and that it's Dragongate on Thursday and possibly Dragongate on Friday. My hunch, my guess is that it will be one self-contained Dragongate show and one sort of Dragongate versus the World show. That's just pure speculation. I haven't heard anything one way or the other. But like Mike said, it appears to be a younger skewing group of Dragongate wrestlers. Now, I would assume you get, Yamato and Shun on that, maybe not. But it appears to be a younger group of Dragongate wrestlers. And I was told, quote, a big group of Dragongate wrestlers are coming over. So you have the four that are on the Prestige show, KZ, Susumu, Ishin, Ho-Ho. And then I would also assume that La Estrella will be a presence on these shows in some form or fashion. But otherwise,
Ultimo too, probably.
Ultimo, yeah. So you're looking at, 6 names plus whatever else would happen.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say this. Everybody that I've talked to about these shows, which is one person that is for sure involved, one person that might be involved, and one person that is definitely not involved in terms of the wrestling on the show, they're all super excited about it. So I'm somebody who I don't take time off of work ever, but I'm considering taking time off of work for this. I don't travel ever. I'm considering traveling for this, and I'm curious to see what these announcements are because I'm fired up about it, and I'm ready to fly to Vegas if these lineups are what I think they could be. So I'm excited for Dragongate. I am glad that they appear, and again, famous last words, maybe I'll be wrong here, they appear to not be a part of the collective, which might sound mean, but I would not fly to Vegas if I was going to sit through a bunch of Game Changer bullshit and then Dragongate. But this feels like a very safe bet. I'm excited to see what comes of this, which should hopefully be announced this week.
Yeah, and to be clear, I have at least with things that have been going around with it, it appears that it's just Mania weekend. I know that there's been a little bit of confusion with the graphic that was posted about Dragongate returning to USA. I don't think that there's much more to read into other than just a big return to kind of the weekend that Dragongate helped form and kind of put on the map in Wrestlemania weekend.
And also, I saw some people that did the little eyeballs deal when Gabe retweeted President Keto's tweet.
Yeah.
That's just Gabe being supportive. It's not an ID thing. Again, famous last words, maybe I'm wrong. It's not an ID thing. Don't worry about it. It's just Gabe. Gabe was involved with a lot of these people for a very long time, and it's Dragongate at WrestleMania weekend. Gabe will always have an affinity for that. That's just him being supportive. So if you're sweating bullets over that, with the information that I have now, I would not do so. Things could always change. But that appeared to be an innocent retweet from one Gabe Sapolsky.
Right, yeah. It was just, oh, that's neat, or knowing how Gabe kind of is about those kinds of things. He would like to keep his name sometimes attached to Dragongate,
Of course.
So
of course.
I don't think there's too much to be read into. But now we can get on to the stuff that I think there's a lot to read into, and that's this big week that Dragongate had back-to-back shows at Tokyo, Cork, and Hall, of course, on the 15th. The New Year Premium, the first ever pure one-on-one Corkin show, and then the follow-up show on the 16th, and then the 2 nights of Young Dragons Cup that happen in Kobe Sanbo Hall on the 18th and 19th. And I think that what we should probably do, Kay, is to just lead off with this before we can talk about the real nuts and bolts of things. Let's get our spoiler-free recommendations out.
Yeah, let's do what we did last week, Mike. I'm going to list off my matches in chronological order, and you tell me if I'm missing any that weren't on your list. Last week, we had the exact same list. We'll see if we can do it again this week, okay?
Absolutely. Let's do this.
All right. I would recommend, if you have not seen any Dragon Gate from the last week, that is 4 shows that are available on the Dragon Gate network, 2 of which have English commentary. I would recommend Masaki Mochizuki versus Mochizuki Jr. from January 15th. I would recommend Jason Lee versus Jackie Kame from January 15th. I would recommend Ben K versus Shuji Kondo, Dragon Daya versus Naruki Doi, and Shun Skywalker versus Yamato, all from January 15th. On the 16th, I would recommend one match. I would recommend 2. Hamare, Jason Lee, and Shun Skywalker versus Ben K, Jackie Kame, and Mochizuki Jr. And the main event of that show, I would recommend Strong Machine J, Dragon Daya, Madoka Kakuta, and Ryoya Tanaka versus BB Hulk, Kagatora, Susumu Yokosuka, and Yamato. January 18th, a good show, not a show that I would make you watch. Nothing I would recommend there. And then on January 19th, I would recommend Mochizuki Jr. versus Yoshiki Kato. So 8 matches, spoiler-free match recommendation. That is what I would recommend to the people.
So I actually have a couple more that I was really into this week. I came away from like the 4 shows, and sadly, my written review is the show that I'm the most down on in comparison to the other 3. But starting with the one-on-one Korkin show, I would also recommend. I co-sign Masaki Mochizuki versus Mochizuki Jr. 2, Jackie Kame versus Jason Lee, Shuji Kondo versus Benkei, Dragon Daya versus Naruki Doi, and Yamato versus Shun Skywalker. I liked Susumu versus Strong Machine J a whole lot. I actually was notebook on it, but I think that was probably a match that, now that we are through the 4 shows, don't really have as much to say about it. So maybe I wouldn't recommend that one. For the the January 16th show, I co-signed the semi-main event and the main event. It was a very lean show, if you ask me. And then when I look at the show from the 18th, I think out of you don't need to watch any of the first round matches, but I would say that the Benkei and Kamei versus Shun and Jason Lee, and then Strong Machine J, KZ, and UT versus Yamato, BB Hulk and Kagatora, I like those a good deal. I would not go notebook on those, but absolutely on the 19th, I would give recommendations to Mochizuki Jr. versus Yoshiki Kato, the young. And then I would also, looking at what I have here, I really adored Mochizuki Jr. Masaki Mochizuki and Daiki Yanageuchi versus Don Fuji and Shuji Kondo. And the main event on that show, Benkei, Rita, and Jason and Jackie Kame versus Shun, Jason Lee, and Kota Minoura. I would recommend that one as well. I really thought that was a real special main event there. I thought it was a real strong weekend of shows.
Yeah, I thought both the Kobe shows were really strong, and I would have the aforementioned Z-Brats versus Gold Class, the tag match from the 18th, and then that main event trios match from the 19th, right at 3 3/4. Flirted with going notebook on both those, so I would co-sign those recommendations. I'm curious now, between those 4 shows, what was your best match of the week? We can start there.
I think the best match of the week was the main event from the one-on-one show. I think Shun Skywalker versus Yamato was the best match of the week, and I think it set a tone now for at least the remainder of that weekend, now going into Gate of Bayside, just because of how special that kind of match was and what happened during it. And it really kind of changes the complexion of what might be happening at Gate of Bayside in that Dreamgate match.
So it's interesting. My match of the week is from that show. It is not that match, though, and I guess we can start there. As we go through this show, we'll talk about January 15, January 16. Then we'll get into the Young Dragon stuff and Kobe before doing a Gate of Bayside preview. A lot to talk about this week, but the semi-main event on the January 15th Korakuen is my Dragon Gate match of the year so far. It's one of the best individual performances, I think, of Naruki Doi's career. I am so high on this Dragon Daya versus Naruki Doi match. I went 4.5 stars on it at a time when, through where we're at in the calendar, I'm already at 8 matches at 4 stars or higher in Dragon Gate this year. Doi versus Daya is the best thing I've ever seen. I wrote in my review, I compared it to, we use the term maestro to talk about old luchadors often doing slow and cooperative grappling. But if you're going to take it from the true meaning of it, a veteran doing a lost style, I felt like we saw Naruki Doi put forth a maestro level performance in this match against Dragon Daya. I was completely floored by Doi. The accidental blood helped. He got busted open on his chin, really nasty gash there, bled buckets really for the Dragongate standard of bleeding, really bled a lot in Corkin. And it was just one of those physical matches in which Daya, I don't think a year ago would have been the right dance partner, would have been capable of fulfilling the role that he needed to in that match, especially once Doi got busted open. Daya was right there with him showing fire, but we talked about this a few weeks ago. The way that Doi has been able to revolutionize the way that we think of him as a singles wrestler, somebody that really up until 4 or 5 years ago, and that might sound insane if you're a newer Dragon Gate fan, but I wouldn't get excited about Doi's singles matches. And, even 2014, 2015, 2016, the rep on him was that he just wasn't a very good singles wrestler. One of the best tag team wrestlers, not only of his generation, not only in Dragon Gate, but I think just one of the best tag team wrestlers ever. But the 2020s have been incredibly kind to Naruki Doi. And as I went through the pantheon of great Doi matches, I found myself ranking this one among the best in terms of individual performances we've seen from him. I thought he was on such another level in this match, and on a level that such few people in wrestling can actually get to at this current point in time.
I think that you had a confluence of things that happening in this match that kind of gave Doi that effect. I think that you have a match that Doi worked really viciously after Daya took him off guard with the flying start and the tope con hello. But you have that happen where he was just really going to town on Dragon Daya in a very severe manner. And then you have that at the same time within Daya busting him open really viciously. And maybe it is the fact that now he's starting to wear the Saito brother gear into Dragon Gate, but it just gave an air of viciousness that you don't really see that much around the show and around the company. And I think, like, really, as we start talking about this premium one-on-one showcase, I just can't impart, like, this was, I feel like, one of the more, and then unintentionally so I feel like in some manners, one of the more vicious nights in Dragon System history, just because of the sheer amount of just like blood that just started to happen, and like the style of matches, especially when you like talk about this semi-main event and main event, just not necessarily something that I feel like one would expect when you were presented this runtime of like 9 singles matches, what the show could end up being. It ended up being, I feel like, a show that was so like violent in a way that it kind of bled over to the next day, and especially with some of the matches that we saw in that undercard.
Yeah, I mean, between the Mochizuki's match and then Susumu, Strong Machine J, Jackie, and Jason, which I want to talk about Jason's physicality here in just a little bit, because I'm kind of blown away by what he's doing. Another guy who has completely reinvented his in-ring style, and I think we might be seeing the best version of Jason Lee right now. And then Daya versus Doi and Shun versus Yamato, which, as I wrote in my review, which I have the written review of that show at voicesofwrestling.com. Mike has the written review of the January 16th show. Shun versus Yamato wasn't the typical Yamato quotations, air quotes, epic match that we normally see out of him. Now it had the slow build, it had the escalation that you would expect, but it was way more of, I think, what we can now deem sort of a Shun Skywalker style match, in the sense that it was really physical, and it built to a point, and then Shun finishes it off. He does the knee first moonsault, but he does it sort of 12 to 6 instead of 3 to 9 on Yamato's body, and then puts him away with the SSW. And it was a match that I seem to be lower on than most. I had it at 4.25. Really liked it. I saw some people had it higher. Again, my match of the week, it was Doi versus Daya. But Mike, let's talk about that main event, because
Yeah.
you have your Dreamgate champion in Yamato. You have Shun Skywalker against him, obviously, and then you have Strong Machine J at ringside. And Strong Machine J didn't do anything, didn't interfere in the match, didn't cost Yamato the match. Didn't really trade words with Shun Skywalker when they were brawling on the floor. He was just out there. He was just making his presence felt. And it feels like one of those things where I might not know where it's going at this point, but come December of this year, this might be a flashpoint where the entire year makes sense given who was involved in this main event.
Right. I think that just the amount of destruction that we saw Shun Skywalker put on Yamato that was completely different from, and he wrote about this in a review, than the three title matches that Shun has had up to this point. And the fact that this match happened less than 10 days before a Dreamgate defense just makes it such like a tantalizing kind of prospect of what might happen in this main event at Gate of Bayside, because you have this performance where Shun Skywalker just immediately starts running through him. He hits him stiff with a chair across the back. Shun gets accidental jaw blood, which is like, I don't know if it was from his nose or from his mouth, but it was like through his mouth port, which just makes it even more just like, it adds so much to Shun Skywalker when he's like known as now as a heel, like covering up his entire body. And then the one thing you see is blood profusely going down his nose into his mouth. I think that it added a whole lot towards this finish, that I just think that it was like real enamoring for Yamato, just the way that he just took a complete ass kicking. Like, in a lot of ways, the match that this reminds me a lot of was the Dangerous Gate 2022 main event, Yuki Yoshioka versus Eita, where Eita beat him basically on the scorecards, but Yoshioka was able to kind of reverse and then get onto his streak of moves, and will like basically, after only like taking 10% of the match, ended up defending the title. You had that happen where someone completely just like, what was like, for something like momentum meters and stuff like that you see in like video games, it's completely towards Shun Skywalker the entire time. And the way that the SSW was landed for the 3 count. Now, not only is Gate of Bayside in doubt, now there's the aspect of Shun Skywalker penning him as clean and as dominantly as someone can pen someone in Dragon Gate looming afterwards. And I think that was like some of the more bold booking and storytelling that we've seen in 2025 so far.
Well, it's a really abnormal situation. I'm going to do my best to hold off on any Gate of Bayside thoughts. I would like for us to have a very clean and succinct preview that stands alone, so maybe it can go on YouTube. So I'm gonna try to hold off on on letting this bleed into my Bayside thoughts. But you have a singles match, the Dreamgate champion loses, which is just incredibly abnormal in Dragon Gate booking. And it's also
not just in Dragon Gate booking, it bleeds over. Pac famously did not enter AEW until the All Out shows, because he refused to like have any other booking that could have him taking a fall before he dropped the Dreamgate. Like, it's arguably the most protected title in wrestling.
And David Schumacher was a total asshole about that when he previewed Double or Nothing on the Ringers wrestling show, whatever it was at the time. And I'll never forget that. Anyways, he was just, God, he drove me nuts on that podcast. But anyways, so it's not only this scenario that Yamato's not normally in, where he's losing a singles match as Dreamgate champion, but something that you'll hear me reference later on when we talk about Bayside is stylistically, Yamato is just doing really interesting things right now. You know, this was different than the Bin match, and I guess in a similar tone to the Kakuta match, because they went out there and just beat the tar out of each other at Dangerous Gate last year. But this Shun match was different than the Ishin match, which was different than the Kano match, which was different than the Daya match. And this seems to be a frequent conversation right now of doing world champion rankings of who's the best world champion in wrestling right now, because there's not a lot of good ones. You know, and Go Shiozaki is on the shelf once again. I don't know if he's getting one knee worked on or both knees worked on.
I think
it might
both,
be both.
yeah.
Which, you know, look, I love Go, and I was really enjoying that 0-1 title run for what it was, but we're entering a point now where it's Yamato, and I don't know if second place is close. You know, I don't know who second place is, but I know they're not close to what he's doing. And even this in a non-title match was just this incredibly captivating thing. Yamato continues his streak of great matches. Shun continues to always deliver in singles atmospheres. And this was a really interesting match that capped off, you know, before we break down some of the rest of the show. I hope this is the first Corkin of every year going forward. This one-on-one premium concept that they came up with here, I thought was really interesting. Concept. Yeah. I hope they do this every year. My one my one thing that I noticed, and maybe it's just because I was, writing the review for this show, so I was taking really detailed notes, more so
Sure.
than if I'm just, watching a Kobe Sambo Hall show. A lot of these matches began in the same way. It was one guy jumping the other guy, trying to get, the early advantage on him, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I actually wish there was more of that just in wrestling at large, but there was a lot of that on this show, or at least it felt like there was a lot of that on this show. That's a minor tweak. I don't think it hurt any of the matches, but when you see that on 4 or 5 matches on a 9-match show, it's noticeable. Otherwise, I mean, what a great concept. You get the first, since Jason's turn, you get the first Jackie and Jason singles match. You get another Mochizuki versus Mochizuki match. You get a first-time matchup like KZ and Monte. And then, a ginormous main event in Shun versus Yamato. From an execution standpoint, I have very few complaints. I really think they hit on something with this show happening in the first Corkin of every year.
Yeah, I guess like my counter to that is that the business was not great over the 2 shows. They combined to be about, like, what was it, 2,100 tickets sold across the 2. It was like 1,100 and 1,000, which I don't know if you could line that up to this format. I think a lot of that, if you look at Dragongate year to year, and when they run Tokyo, they run Western Japan first in the year, so that by the time they get to Tokyo, I mean, think about in your head, listener, this show was on January 15th. There was already shows like dating back to the 31st. So essentially at the end of at least 2 full weeks of shows. So I think because of that, we always see a kind of tough beginning of Dragon Gate's year. And I don't think that this format kind of solves that, but I don't think that this format like completely overrun the next day, which was the fear that we had about this, was like, okay, you have like this, and then what's going to end up being the drop off the next day? The drop off wasn't there. I kind of want to actually see this format used at a different time, just to see like if this is actually something that could be like a reliable drawing kind of thing. Because I think if you stick it in January, then this time next year, we're going to be like, well, attendance was not amazing, but that's because they probably have their first Corkin of the year in the 2nd or 3rd week of January.
I think we have enough evidence now to know that these January Corkin shows just don't draw what the rest of the year draws. And we've been seeing that since I think they started doing these in 2021, because in 2020 they ran 2 Corkins, but one was a standalone Dragon Gate show, and then it wasn't a doubleheader. That was the middle of the month, and they came back at the end of the month and ran the Toryumon reunion show. The first one that was a sellout and a very big success. But since 2021, they've been doing this January Corkin double shot, and it doesn't feel necessary. I've never understood why they do it, because you've got the traditional double shot in December that always does well. You have the shows in June that they've added the double shot there as well. And, that has been dependent on what they've booked. But they did Mochizuki versus Shingo in Corkin last January, and that didn't sell out. And the next night, there was a noticeable drop-off there. There were 400 or 500 fans less from Mochizuki Shingo to whatever was on the next night. You're right. Economically, it just doesn't make sense to have these 2 shows in January, given what has already been through that building 15 days into the year. So I wish they would stop doing it. I like the borderline symbolism of, hey, this first Corkin of the year, we're going to get all singles matches. I just wish it would have been one show. I have no evidence to prove this, but I think if it was just the one show and it was just those one-on-one matches, I think they would have done more than 1,100 fans.
Yeah, but also then you're giving up, like, other than you have Jason and Jackie, so that's Twin Gate build. You kind of have the interplay with Strong Machine J in that main event. You're not necessarily building up like your show in 10 days. Like, that's the problem about having one of those.
Yeah, I mean, who was missing off the 15th? They didn't have a singles match for Rita, but they got him involved, and I mean, what else? What else? Who was missing? There was no BB Hulk match, obviously. If they did this again next year, you would assume that Dragon Kid would be on it. Maybe you put the young guys on there, some of the Mochizuki Dojo guys.
There's no Tanaka on this match show.
Yeah, but there doesn't. I mean, I love.
I'm just
guy,
thinking about
people
who are in title feuds right now.
Yeah. I don't feel like anything was missing off of this show, and I feel like they can get away with that. I think 8 singles matches is probably the sweet spot.
Hmm.
Or, I guess it kind of kills the gimmick, but 8 singles matches and a trios match in the middle of the card, I think would be perfectly succinct. I know that kind of kills the gimmick, but what can you do?
No, and that's all fair. I think that just because of the uniqueness of the schedule, like you kind of needed to have that second show to be able to do that kind of full throated build and go home for Yokohama in that kind of way. But that's just again just how the schedule kind of worked out this year. I feel like in that way that Yokohama is coming up, and right now instead of a little bit deeper into the year. So I think there's aspect of that as well. But there's one match we really have not touched on whatsoever. But I think I walked away thinking that this match is exactly the what we were dreaming for on this one-on-one show. Shuji Kondo versus Benkei was the Shuji Kondo we were hoping was coming in 2020.
And I've always been a little bit higher on his 2020 to now run than you have. I think outside of, when he signed on in 2020, we thought maybe he was going to turn heel and join RED, and that didn't happen. He was, Toryumon generation up till the Achilles injury, and since then has largely existed. But I've gotten everything out of Kondo that I've wanted to get out of him. I think his Twin Gate run with Kano, because his partner was Kano and not a typical Dragon Gate wrestler, it gets lost in the shuffle a little bit. That was an excellent Twin Gate run. It was capped off by Kondo and Kano versus Susumu and Kondo, which is the best Kondo match ever. I'm perfectly happy with the output over the last 5 years that we've seen from Shuji Kondo. This just happened to be the best singles match that he's had in 5 years. And this was a Kondo special. This is, and I wrote this in my review, I've said this on this podcast 100 times. If you simulate Kondo's career 100 times, I feel like we're living in the worst version of his career, because he should have a large portfolio of matches like this against wrestlers like Benkei. And sadly, he just doesn't have it because of where he's worked, when he's worked. But I want to talk about Benkei in a second. But Shuji Kondo, Mike, you have the floor, because my God, was he great in this match.
Yeah, and I guess like the thing that that kind of colors at least my mindset of this era Shuji Kondo was the idea that like when he was going to come in, it felt like he was going to be coming in as like a big thing, big surprise, and it was like, oh, maybe then COVID happens and he's still kind of a surprise, and we were expecting like near immediately like the big heel turn. But ever since that became clear that this was not really Shuji Kondo coming in for one last big run, is just Shuji Kondo kind of coming into landing at home. I think that he has like been like established like a fun presence, but you don't always get to see the best aspects of Shuji Kondo in Dragon Gate. Like that's kind of a reality of it, just because you're not getting matches like this versus Benkei, or kind of his throwing around the small guy specials that sometimes you will get to see when he gets to be across the ring from Kamei or Rita. So when you get to have a match where it was just a car wreck, it just really felt like two trucks just hitting each other back and forth until basically Kondo falling over after the spear. Like you just don't get that a lot in this run, and I think that that's kind of what makes this match really special.
He was on his A game. It was a really, really excellent performance from him, and the kind of thing that at that point in the show, the Mochizukis kicked things off and they were great. There was Minoru versus Hyo, which was just wrong on a number of levels. Yeah, the sneaky good KZ Monte match, which I found a really hard time grading because I thought the work was so strong, but I also on this show it was tough to be like, okay, well that match was great, but I also feel like we're gonna get better great matches later on in the show. So perhaps I underrated KZ Monte there. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd say like the other thing about KZ Monte, just because it was like very chaotic, and then you had the finish kind of out of nowhere and like winning with like the KZ type, and just like how definitive it felt. If that was kind of the match that at least early on in the card felt so kind of abrupt, and then the way it led into Ishin versus Kakuta just was a very, I think if you look at the show kind of in phases, the second phase of like these two matches, you just had things happening in a way that was just like both matches extremely unexpected and kind of took you off guard a little bit.
I think if KZ versus Monte were to happen on the next night, where it's the only, or the only singles match or one of two singles matches on that show, I think everybody thinks way more of it. It is the match that got buried in the shuffle here because there's so much to dive into on this show. And KZ versus Monte is a match that had zero storyline implications. They had no hatred. It was just really clean, really pretty wrestling, and I really like that style. And then you had Ishin and Kakuta, Jason and Jackie, which I want to talk about, and then you had this Kondo match that I really wasn't sure what we were going to get from it, because there's a realistic chance that this match could have been disappointing and it could have been this weird styles clash. But my God, did both of these guys bring it? And Mike, as we sit here, we're recording January 21st. I have to go over the Ben K televised matches of 2025. He had the match in Kyoto is him and Kanda versus Sahara and Tanaka. I'm sorry, this was in Kobe. And that was a fine match. Nothing really special there. Undercard fodder. January 11th in Kyoto, it's him and Mochizuki Jr. against Ishin and Shun Skywalker. I went 4.25 on that. Next night in Osaka, Ben, Jackie, Mochizuki Jr., Rita versus Homare, Jason, Minoura, and Skywalker. Went 4.25 on that. We sadly did not get him, Kakuta, and Strong Machine J versus Paradox and Nagoya. Why would we throw that on YouTube? What a waste of time that would be. So you go into Korakuen, and you have this 4.25 match against Shuji Kondo. The next night, it's Homare, Jason, and Shun versus Ben, Jackie, and Junior, which I gave 4 stars to. You gave, I think, 3.5 to. And then you go to the 2 matches in Kobe, the tag match on the 18th and the trios match on the 19th, and I went 3.75 there on both those matches. I think Ben K is the best wrestler in the world so far in 2025.
You encouraged me to go back through my star ratings and at least just like doing like the eye test. It's going to be hard for me to have an argument for anyone else. I mean, Gabe Kidd maybe, but that's like 2 matches that you're really talking about there. So I think Ben K really has been just exceptional, and like the way that him and Kamei have had like this real easy chemistry. It throws up a giant red flag for me how good this is going, to be quite honest, just because I'm like Jackie Kamei, he's fitting in very well, but then like he intentionally flubs like the go home line on the 119 show, and it's just like, man, I feel like you're acting like this is all very cool, but it seems like to me that things aren't going to be cool maybe happening real soon. But it's Ben has just been on a tear, and it has worked from just doing like either just standard heavyweight wrestling of Shuji Kondo to like the matches he's been having with Gold Class against Z-Brats, and it just combines to see just a real exceptional just start of the year from it. It kind of reminds me, remember the year that Gamma like had like 2 4-star matches in 10 days?
I do.
That's kind of the air, except there's also an air of legitimacy happening where like we've seen Ben K really progress over the last 24 months. And I think that now Gold Class, like we talked about Gold Class versus Z-Brats was our feuds of the year. You really have this great just like this unit that has now like had this big kick up with like Jack Kamei basically for deciding to forget everything that happened after the end of the cage match at Dead or Alive. And I think that with like Ben K now being on like the form, Gold Class is like the most complete act working right now in wrestling.
Completely. To your point about who's in the conversation with Ben, I really, really have liked Cavernario's output in CMLL this year, and I really hope they take him seriously as a cusp main eventer sort of guy this year. Cavernario has been really, really good. Hechicero's been good, and I would mention Gabe Kidd, but otherwise, it's been. And again, I don't even particularly think it's close right now. The output Ben has is stunning between Kyoto and Osaka, the 2 4-star plus matches in Korakuen, and then nearly going notebook with both of his matches in Kobe. He's on one right now. And this Gold Class foursome is really impressive. It feels like maybe the plan with Kame is not to turn him heel, although that very could easily be the case. it seems like the plan with Kame is that we got zapped with the Men in Black memory eraser. And while Hyo and Monte both have this lingering big hug feeling that they can't really get over, and I'm not sure the company wants us to get over, because I still think those guys are going to end up teaming together in whatever unit they end up going to. We got hit with the Men in Black on Kame, and other than the gear, which by Gate of Bayside, he better have new gear, we are just pretending none of that happened. He has just been slotted into gold class. He hasn't missed a beat. He's got great chemistry with Rita, great chemistry with Junior, and really great chemistry with Ben. And I think that's part of what has made Ben so special so far this year, is that he just looks really energized. Ben, we have seen over the course of now, almost 9 years, Ben K comes and goes, man. There are times where either his body's not right or his mind's not right, and you can tell, things can get weird with him. And even if he's found more consistency over the last 3 or 4 years, it can still happen. Ben right now, he is locked in, and I was very much against Gold Class tinkering with that trio at all. I wanted them to stay a trio, but this feels like the best case scenario possible. I am all in on Gold Class right now.
Yeah, and it really has been just all three, or really all four of them, kind of working at this level. We did not touch much on Mochizuki versus Mochizuki Jr. too. It rocked. I don't know really like how else to really describe the kind of matches that they're having. I think that we've seen it, and it's really more of a conversation when we get into the Kobe shows, how Mochizuki has kind of progressed in this, or Junior has progressed in his over this last weekend, really, in like his career to this point. But I just like the fact that we are going to be just like craving the Junior finally pinning his dad for at least another year, just like the way that you have that Mochizuki Senior got to a point where it was like, oh no, I just got I saw my moment and made it into a pin, and I'm out of here, and you're still not beating me yet. But I thought that this was a step down from their match last July, but it was such like a smart way to start off the show, especially considering like the YouTube situation that this match went up on YouTube just like right as people are talking match of the year season.
I was shocked by this finish. I expected a time limit draw or a double count out or another double knockout finish. So now you're at a point where Mochizuki Jr. is 0-1-1 against his dad. And it goes back to the thing that I always say about Junior is they've always got him doing something. And we know with how conservative Dragongate's booking is that he's not going to check all of these boxes this year. There's no reason to check all of these boxes this year, but you now have this ongoing feud with his dad where they're going to get another singles match. I would assume from there they go 1-1-1, and then they have a fourth match where I would assume at that point Junior wins. You have him and Kato, who very clearly have chemistry and now have a history, and I'm quite excited to see where they go from there. You have him and Ishin, which is a story they've now told a few different ways, and those guys are going to be wrestling each other forever. You have him and Hamare, who have really special chemistry with one another, and that might end up being his best opponent out of the young bunch of guys. I think he and Hamare mix really well together. And also now you have a new Mochizuki dojo that he's not in. And so his relationship with Fuda and Daiki and Sahara going forward, I think they're going to be side-eyeing each other. I really want to see Gold Class, the four of them, against Mochizuki Dojo, the four of them. So Junior has all of these interesting things that he could tackle throughout the year, not to mention Strong Machine J, who they can always go back to, not to mention Shun Skywalker, who they can always go back to, not to mention Paradox, and I think he should have a Dreamgate challenge at some point against Yamato. Again, the booking with him over the 2.5 years he's been in the company has been so impressive. As long as he's been healthy, he's always doing something. And you're starting to see the list of history grow. The list of lore, for lack of a better term, is expanding. And it's what we got out of Tozawa after a decade in the company. It's what we got out of Shingo after a decade in the company. Hulk, same deal. It's happening before our eyes with Junior and Ishin and Kato and Tanaka and Rita and Minoura. And I think Junior is the guy that is going to benefit most from long-term storytelling as we move forward.
Yeah, and not to get ahead of ourselves and in this show, he really has a good case to be probably and we were talking about how the 4-man gold class was going to kind of shake out with him, that he might end up being, at least for like the next few months, the most talented lost post in wrestling, and it's great. It works so well for him. Like, he is, there's no one in wrestling who I liked seeing getting his ass kicked, and you taking that ass kicking and rev himself up as much as Mochizuki Jr.
I think we found peace between the panelists and the people that read the SFM 50 this year. I've never felt like there's been too much Dragongate on the ballot. Obviously, in 2022 and 2023, I would say, okay, who are we replacing them with? What if you're gonna take Dragongate guys off, who's gonna be on? But 2024, outside of the David Finley truthers, who I do not have time for, I think we struck a very nice score with SFM 50. I got bad news for the anti-Dragongate contingent come 30 under 30 this year, because it should be loaded with Dragongate guys. Junior, I thought, placed very respectably last year. I think we have one more year to vote for Shun Skywalker. You got Isha now. You got Kato now. We'll see if Homare makes it. Tanaka's there. Akihiro Sahara, I have a ton of thoughts on later. Daiki Yanagiuchi will touch on. 30 under 30 is looking very Dragongate this year.
Yeah, I think there's like no way can it not be, given the week that we saw out of these guys. Did you have any other big takes on one-on-one before we move on?
No. I didn't talk a lot about Jason and Jackie, but I can do that when we preview Bayside. And 116. Not to get ahead of you, but I'll just throw this out here because it's not super consequential. It's not in our spoiler-free recommendations because it's not, in theory, a great match, and it's also not super consequential to anything relevant in the promotion. Ultimo and Luis Monte versus KZ and UT, a really, really fun match.
Yeah, I did not mention it as a recommendation, but it was the Mike Spears special when you have interested Ultimo, because he's like, hey, UT means I can actually, have fun and not do the same 3 things I do every match.
Yeah, well, it goes back to a theory that I've had for years now, that Ultimo really enjoys wrestling UT, and I feel like we have enough history and evidence of, hey, Ultimo's trying in this match. Oh, who's he wrestling? Oh, UT? I think those two get along. What it should inspire you to do specifically, Mike, you're woefully behind on CMLL.
I know.
You have to watch, and I'm going to butcher that guy's name again.
Oh, Shewa?
Thank you. Shewa and Guerrero Maya Jr. You have to watch their stuff. You are going to be so into it, okay? It is your style of wrestling.
I know, and as someone who has like dedicated himself to the cataloging of a certain bad wrestling promotion, I could much rather be using my time to have that. Which case, by the way, just finished that last Shinkiba show, and boy, the air around that is just noxious.
No, it seems bad. Okay, let's do that here real quick. So
yeah,
Strong Hearts, are they disbanded as of now, or are they doing
they're
one?
done.
So they're not even doing like a Strong Hearts final.
No, not to my knowledge. I at least from the cards that have already been released for Glate, no.
So that's weird, right?
I mean, someone on this show has been saying for months that they don't think that Strong Hearts was long for this world. So,
I know. But it's weird to not milk whatever was left of that.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Yeah, it's weird not to have like that or use them as like something to get over your heel faction.
Well, hey,
once.
God forbid we do that. I mean, come on now. What are you gonna have? What is Soma Watanabe gonna get over? Come on now.
Hey, Soma Watanabe is not in the G-Rush tournament, of which I don't know if it's an actual title tournament or if it's just like them trying to do their own version of high speed things for a moment. But yeah, no, you already have like El Lindemann doing the G-Rush tournament on this next show. Shima is teaming with Joe Lando, Junji and Michiko against BGI. And then T-Hawk is teaming with, is getting involved in like the program that's happening between Minoru Tanaka and Katsuhiko Nakajima that has like Ryo Aitaka and Takinori Ito around with it. Like, it's weird.
So all of that sounds bad. I I am incredibly conflicted because if they're done and they're not even gonna, it's so weird they're not doing a send-off show. That seems really fishy and makes me want to know what's up there. But
They did it in front of 177 people in first ring.
I know, and it's not. Look, it's not like you need Erie there. That's not the hang up. So I don't understand. But the point is, I'm a man with limited time. I would love to dedicate. I would love to dedicate more time to the stuff, but I don't have the time. I have to make money, unfortunately. So I really want to sit down and write like, hey, here's the history of Strong Hearts. Here's what they were.
Yeah.
It's, we have to talk about Wrestle One attendance. We have to talk about when they just killed it in DDT and then didn't come back. We have to talk about when Nick Jackson introduced them at the AEW presser and called them Love Hearts, and everybody was confused. And I was like, no, it's Strong Hearts. Here's who they are. They were going to move to Mexico. COVID happened. They started doing...
They claimed that they were going to have Strong Hearts versus the Elite happening at like their first WWE Japan show.
Which I believe if they could have made it happen, they would have done. That was at a time where Omega in Japan was a real hot button issue. And I don't totally know what the truth is there. I don't know if anybody does, but the OWE show that happened in December of 2019 was supposed to have Omega and the Bucks on it.
Or it was claimed by because Kenny Omega showed up to like the OWE shows, and like they were claiming like that there was going to be like the Elite there at that Korakuen Hall show. Yeah,
which would have been a big deal because the Bucks in New Japan right now means nothing because the Bucks have changed so much and New Japan has changed so much, and there isn't that like, oh, these were New Japan guys previously, I should go see them again. But if they would have wrestled in Korakuen in 2019, that would have been Omega would have been a big deal, period. But even the Bucks would have been a big deal. Remember they did that show in Singapore that was Shima and Omega and the Monk against the three guys from Singapore, one of whom was Trexus, who I remember being a pretty good wrestler. Oh, that's Dante Chen. He's in NXT now. Good for him. I didn't realize that. Good for him. He had talent. So, there was just all that. It feels like there should be written documentation of here's what Strong Hearts were. Here's their legacy. All of this is weird, but I don't think I have the time and energy to do that. And I'm just not sure anybody cares about it.
Yeah. Like, as one of the people that was kind of on the OWE beat, other than I think just for the fact that there would be something that would exist on the internet, I don't know.
In terms of just the history of all that.
Yeah, because there's just not really like a written history.
I don't think Nuclear Convoy's around that much anymore, and he was the main point of contact for a lot of that stuff, and a lot of that is Twitter DMs or Twitter threads that might have been deleted by now. So it's a really weird history, and it's again, had they gone out not even triumphantly because it's so past the point of triumph now, but had they just said like, hey, in May on Shima's anniversary, we're going to run Korakuen or Shinjuku Face or a basement in Osaka, whatever it may be, and we're going to have the Strong Hearts final show, I think it would have motivated me to really write something because I want written documentation of that whole era, especially the Wrestle One stuff, which is absolutely phenomenal if you've never seen it. But if they're going out like this, I'm finding it hard to believe that I'm going to sit down and write all of that because that's 7 years worth of history in detailed, complicated history at that.
Yeah, and it's also like a history that I think for at least some parts of it, we might be years from like hearing like other than like what was like hearsay or DMs, like you're not gonna, no, like I don't think like suddenly like a lot of like the Americans who work like OWE or will like talk about that, or like to be quite honest, like I don't see, because I was like, I've been asked this several times, I don't see Strong Hearts ending meaning that like T-Hawk or Linda are leaving Shima's grasp either. So like I feel like there's like an aspect of it that like, yeah, there's like the time, because there is like the fascinating thing of like, oh yeah, the one time that T-Hawk was ever a draw, I mean, talk about that with like Wrestle One, but also just like the like the various like weird in and outs of DDT are like fascinating, like to like a certain degree that I wonder what like like other sides of the story can be told, and I wonder if that like right now is the time for that.
I can I can write the article to post my DMs with Daniel Makabe, who I did not know and still really don't know, but I just bombarded him one day when he was announcing he was going to wrestle Shima in Toronto. I was like, "Oh, you should let Shima know that you could grapple. Shima, he might really want to grapple with you." He's like, "I don't know who you are, but thanks. I'll keep that in mind." And then after the match, he goes, "He did not want to grapple with me. Not what he was there to do."
I mean,
my bad.
I mean, like you could also have like, Arena Nakapon, like the Golpadores versus Shima and T-Hawk. Like this,
Yeah. I mean, who would have thought that those guys would end up being really good wrestlers?
it worked out for them.
They've carved out a nice niche for themselves. It's also, oh god, it's so weird. Like, I want to know what happened with them in New Japan, because I really thought they were gonna find this like secret Titanic lifeboat in New Japan and just ride it out there. And I still like you're I think less receptive to that idea than I am. I think Lindemann could backdoor his way into New Japan tomorrow, and that would not shock me. I don't think it's likely, but I think it could very easily happen. But it seemed like they were all gonna land there, and then one day it was just over.
Yeah, no, Lindemann's like the one person that like when I say I want to hear other sides of this, I would love to like in 10 years sit down with Phil Lindemann and talk about his career post 2018.
Well, I mean, Jay's always said that would be the one that would go back if they were ever going to go back.
Yeah. I mean, he's the one that doesn't have the Scarlet Letter at like this point. But I mean, but even at that time, like it was like serious talk about like, oh, is El Lindemann going to jump at this point? Like that was a conversation that was being had when they were over and working New Japan regularly.
I thought he should have. Now, again, that's me saying that without the politics or the chemistry with those guys, whatever. But yeah, I mean, he could waltz into the New Japan Juniors division tomorrow, and I mean, no disrespect to Despy, who is not totally my cup of tea, but I recognize he's a great wrestler. I mean, Lindemann now is better than Despy's been at any point in his career, and with Dokai hurt, he's the only other guy that I think really rivals Linda. And Linda was one of my top 50 wrestlers this past year, and I thought Glate was horrendous. And I think 2 years ago, he was one of my top 10 wrestlers in the world. He can go at a high level. He's just surrounded by just a bunch of nonsense right now.
And the frustrating thing is that he still has, this is his last year of 30 under 30 eligibility.
I'll vote for him again. I mean, he has not waned in quality. It's just the quality of opponent that unfortunately sucks for him right now.
Yeah, man, that's like the big thing with that there. But yeah, no, just a very kind of weird circumstances. The Tokyo Bad Boys versus Tokyo Yankees, I'd probably go 3.5 on it. It was not bad. I was more surprised by the fact that Eichmann took the fall.
Oh, that is interesting. Okay, that's good to know. We DM'd about this, but I'll say it here for public record because I am mean. I thought Fujiwara and Kento from the photos I saw both looked really out of shape.
Yeah, and in different ways.
Yeah, I mean, Fujiwara just doesn't look healthy. He doesn't look like somebody that I would want to employ necessarily. And Kento,
lost a lot of muscle.
Kento used to have the body of a Greek god. He was built like a psychopath, and he doesn't have that anymore. And it's not shocking. I mean, given that they won the titles, I would assume the financial situation, even with him being a rich kid and knowing that he has some sponsors and seems to have money being funneled from Japan from his parents, the financials of them living in Mexico for as long as they did never made sense. I would expect, if anybody will have them, for them to start showing up on scummy Japanese indies going forward. I don't know that to be sure. I at one point had very, very good contact with the Kento camp. That is obviously not the case anymore. So I don't know if they're done in Mexico, but
I don't think they are.
They have to be. I mean, they're not. I didn't watch the last time they made AAA TV, but Cub said it was really good. But I mean, they never do anything.
No, I mean, like, they're kind of hard slotted, like, with that, and then the whole, like, overwhelming question about AAA about, like, are they taping for TV? Do they have a TV deal? Like,
That is the
where?
weirdest story. Thank God
Yeah,
for Cubs. That I
yeah,
cannot believe more people are. I mean, I guess it's AAA TV, so at the end of the day,
yeah,
who cares? But that is the weirdest story in wrestling right now.
yeah. I do feel a certain kinship with Cubs right now, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, we are the two men who are rolling the rock up the mountain just for it to fall every day. Uh,
Real quick, so because I don't
yeah,
have a ton of thoughts on 116, I can kind of tie those into the Bayside preview. But if you haven't been paying attention to it, for whatever reason, after a few years of being totally irrelevant, IWRG and Nakompon is booking really interesting upper card matches this year. Undercards, you're not missing anything there. But Flamita's back in Mexico and he's working IWRG, and he's been really, really good. There's the show from the 12th. All their shows their Thursday show is live streamed on YouTube. It was Arez, Latigo, and Toxin versus Flamita, Noisy Boy, and Spiderfly. It's from the January 12th IWRG show. I went 4 stars on it. I thought it was really good. I've heard the last 2 live stream shows they've had, Flamita's had good matches on there as well. Estrella's been booked a little bit by IWRG. He hasn't been on the last few shows. I would really love it if Estrella found a home there. I think that'd be very nice for him. And as long as Flamita's working there, I'm going to continue to watch. That has become, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a nice little lucha indie again.
I mean, part of it might also be now that they're like publishing like all their bookers, and you see like it's like Black Terry and Hip Hop Man behind
Exactly.
it.
Yeah, it's like, oh, that's okay. That's a winning combo. That works for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Things on 116. I mean, really, like the only like thing that I mean, yeah, it all basically is like Gate of Bayside related on it. But
I'll say this. I thought the semi-main, which was Shun, Jason, and Hamare versus Ben Jr. and Kame, I thought that was an unbelievable trios match in the sense that even if we're seeing more of that style sort of permeate throughout wrestling at times, there's just the level of polish in that match was just so different than anything that we see anywhere else. And I'm really, really intrigued by the work that Jason is doing right now because, if you remember 2021, 2022, when he was in Masquerade, I was talking about how I thought he was the best junior in Japan. Now, it coincided with a time in which I thought the juniors divisions across Japan were as weak as they had ever been. But I thought Jason would have been the best wrestler in the New Japan Juniors division. All Japan, Noah, could have moonwalked into DDT. Same deal, would have been the best. And then in 2023, he started to put on muscle. And we noticed it, and Jay would talk about it on commentary. It wasn't a secretive thing, but he put on muscle. And I thought he lost some of his agility and lost some of the things that made him special. Last year, obviously, he had all the great matches with Kame as a tag team earlier in the year, and then turned heel. And I thought Hit the Ground Running as a heel has been very, very good his entire time in Z-Brats. He and Kame now wrestling each other in all of these tags. I am floored by the work Jason is doing. They are doing such a good job of having Kame get momentum and having him heat up in the middle of these matches, and then having Jason just kill all of his momentum. It is such an interesting way that they are working these matches where even in the house style, even with all the moves they're doing, it is so clear that Jason is this dominant heel who, to some degree, now obviously things change in the Kobe main event on the 19th, but to some degree has Jackie's number. And I think the work that they are doing right now is utterly phenomenal.
yeah, and I think that like having that happen on the Kobe show kind of as like the go home kind of thing, like after really 2 weeks of Z-Brats having their number every way possible, felt like a little redemptive going into Gate of Bayside in a lot of ways. I had a Z-Brats point that I think I'll hold off until we talk about Bayside, but it's just really refreshing to see what you can do with a larger heel unit right now.
Yeah, and that's without Valletta. Who knows? Maybe we'll
Right.
see him. Maybe we'll see him back at Bayside or back in February. I'll throw this out there before we move on to the Young Dragons Cup stuff, which I want to talk about. But I am hoping and praying and crossing my fingers and my toes that at Bayside we get the announcement that Rey de Parejas is coming back, and it's coming back in February, which is how they booked it in 2023. That was a tournament that started in February and ended at the March Korakuen. Last year, it started in March and ended at the April Korakuen. The reason that's relevant is in February, we get a Kyoto KBS Hall show, a Korakuen, obviously, a double shot in Fukuoka, and then a Kobe Art Center show, and then Memorial Gate in Wakayama. In March, we have Champion Gate, or what we assume will be 2 Champion Gate shows in Osaka on March 1st and 2nd, a Korakuen on March 4th, and that is the only bit of TV we get up through a March 30th Sambo Hall show. So that would put Rey de Parejas, if it happens in March, it would be the same thing as King of Gate, where they book these tournaments that line up on months where there are just no TV. And that would be super, super disappointing. So hopefully at Bayside, we get a Rey de Parejas announcement, and maybe we'll see Valletta come back for that.
Yeah, no, like with how the TV works, and that they like having something for that first Fukuoka double shot of the year.
Yeah. I mean, the Rey de Parejas 2023 that we got, like Nagano and Kato versus the Mochizukis on that one, that was really good. There's a bunch of good stuff there. So, February's busy. I'd like to see that tag tournament. And once we get through the first week of March, that is when we're going to launch our new Rewind and Rewatch project, because we got nothing going on in March after the 2 Osaka shows in Korakuen.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting schedule so far this year, and that led us to a doubleheader in Kobe Sambo Hall for the Young Dragons Cup. And I think we first kind of want to talk about the cup by itself, and then we'll talk about the remainder of these cards. But Case, interesting tournament. I guess we've gone this far into the show without saying this. We have a new Young Dragon Cup champion in Yoshiki Kato.
I am very excited coming out of these shows about Kato's potential. I thought they put him in a really big spot, and he delivered in every way possible that I would want him to. It's a big deal to win a Young Dragons Cup. I talked about this last week about how, in the history of the Young Dragons Cup, it's been very, very obvious, very intentional booking. They put who they feel is the top prospect in the company. They put him over in this tournament. You go back to the beginning in 1997. It was Magnum Tokyo who was the first winner of that. You go on from there. Genki, Kanda, who really mattered. Kanda in 1999, he wins it. Well, what happens in 2000? Susumu and Kanda form their tag team. M2K is formed shortly thereafter.
And they win the Yamaha Cup.
Exactly. And then, Milano, Owashi, and Ishimori sort of round out the relevant Young Dragons Cups. I forgot that Takeshi Minamino won it in 2003. That one, a blemish on the record if there ever was one. But, it's very obvious booking, and Kato, I think, faced, a real challenge being in the same tournament as Junior and as Tanaka and as Rita and as Homare. That's a lot of guys, a lot of high-end guys who have really bright futures in this company. But as we left these 2 shows in Kobe, I felt like they got the right guy. My thought going out of this is Yamato's going to win at Bayside, and then I think we're going to get Yamato versus Yoshiki Kato at Champion Gate in Osaka. That feels like the appropriate match. It feels like Kato has that momentum. And after watching him against Mochizuki Jr. on the 19th, I think he can hang in that environment.
Yeah, and I think that when we talk about the decision to put the cup in Kato's hands, the one thing that I mean, I'll take a little bit of a lap here, though I've always kind of pointed out about him, is since he's a little older, they're going to start with him younger. They're going to start with him sooner. And you look at before his injuries, each time it looked like that they were about to take a next huge step with him. I mean, he was Triangle Gate champion and before his knee blew out, and it was very clear that they were okay, we want to start making this guy matter. So when the Young Dragon Cup was announced, immediately going oh, this is the big step for Yoshiki Kato. And that's what we got to see this weekend in Kobe. And I think that when you look at Kato and you look at the kind of wrestler he is, he's a real traditional power wrestler trained in the Dragon system. And we would say for his entire career, up to this point, oh yeah, no, he is this power wrestler, and he has these spiky bits, these parts where he's not polished, where he's not smooth. And when you are a rookie and you have this kind of profile, it's very charming to see the guy being oh, a while, like he had like a baby bull kind of aspect to him, especially like when you team him with Kaito Nagano and them. But what we saw over these 2 days was a fully formed power wrestler without any of those growing pains. Like he's now, I don't know if he is like a full caps guy at this point, but he's at the end of this, and especially the match that he had in the finals against Mochizuki Jr. that I went notebook on. I think that he's well on the way, and he has at least over the 2-day period, we've seen him now become like a certified player within the promotion. And now you look around and you go like, okay, after Shun and Z-Brats, there's going to be a conversation about who's really the number 2 there. And I think that's going to be real fascinating, because there are times you would say it was Ishin, times you would say it's Kai, and there's times now that you maybe say maybe it's Yoshiki Kato like making a claim for that. And I think absolutely you look at that Champion Gate weekend in March, that's their real proving ground of unknowns, especially in the Dreamgate picture, because of the friendly confines of Osaka Edion 2 and the idea of, hey, this is our Edion 2 title match each year. I think that he's a big heavy favorite for getting a Dream Key for that weekend coming up in March.
I'm glad you went notebook on the Mochizuki Jr. match. I did as well. I went 4 flat on it. And I think if there was one critique of the match, the beatdown in the middle, it's a 10-minute match. The beatdown of Junior goes on for a really, really long time. And I could see it losing people. And I could see people not coming back from that. But I was invested. I was locked in. And the difference between Kato now and Kato at any point in his career prior to this, and you're exactly right, he's not only older, but he's now had 2 pretty serious injuries. So they're going to go with him. 2025 is going to be a year where I think we get a lot of Kato, and I think that's the right move. But watch Mochizuki Jr.'s comeback in this match. It's not only everything we love about Junior.
He's so good.
The fire is there. Oh my God, he's on another level when you talk about wrestlers under 30 years old. The interesting thing with this one is that not only is Junior so great, but Kato, charisma-wise, is right there with him in this match. It's really the difference between any other Kato performance we've seen before. And I talked about this all last year. Kato was really finding his groove as a wrestler when he got hurt last year. This weekend, the Daiki match on the first night, which I thought was stellar for what it was. The Fuda match earlier on this night, which, puzzling booking, but whatever. And then this match here, Kato was so good. He turned into a monster in this match in the last few minutes, and it was exactly what you would have hoped for. It was the exact type of thing that you would want, and it's the type of thing you can replicate against Yamato and put forth a super compelling Dreamgate match. Now, again, we're sort of stomping on Strong Machine J's Dreamgate hopes here, but if I have the pencil, I'm doing Kato versus Yamato in Osaka, and I'm calling it a day. I think Kato is at that level coming out of this match. Really, really impressed with what he did, just because it felt so complete. It felt like we finally had an idea of what Kato can be in meaningful matches going forward. And if it's anything like these Junior matches, it's going to be quite special to see.
Yeah, and I think Junior being that opponent gets over like the monsterness of Kato. Like I think about the Canadian backbreaker where Junior was basically bent on his shoulders. I'm like, oh yeah, Junior is one of the most flexible people on this roster. He's exactly the person you want to have as like the person that takes these moves. And I would like to note that Kato has a new finish, the Rencita, and Case, it's the old Night Ride. They gave him basically T-Hawk's old finish.
So that's he's got the guy on his shoulder long ways, and then he kind of slams him face first into the mat. That's that move, right?
It's the one that he has them up in a crucifix overhead, and then he brings them up and slams them down face first, like the Night Ride.
Yeah. No, it's I believe it was Bobby Lashley's first finisher when he got called up to SmackDown. In my notes, I've been calling it the Dominator, which I think is what Lashley called that move in 2006. But it works. It's a great move for him.
Yeah, and you got to see him like in my way adore the Daiki match just because I think I'm now like really high on Daiki Yanagiuchi.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I've only been saying this for 2 years now, but you have the floor.
He has a certain bit of edge now that we've not seen out
He's
of him.
not a dork. Mike, I have this in my notes word for
He's no longer a dork.
He is not a dork. Mike, you get him a haircut, you get him a proper young men's haircut. This guy is not going to be a dork anymore.
Yeah, take away the Zack Ryder tights.
Yep.
You know,
You see, the gear doesn't bother me. I like his gear. I think it's because it's not annoying like Zack Ryder's were. I think this gear fits him. It's the haircut. He's got to get a better haircut.
it's the haircut and like the gooch and like the rainbow colors that kind of makes him come off like a dweeb to me.
I get that. The haircut's going to fix it. The gear's fine. Leave the gear alone. It's the haircut that's going to make all the difference. I'll say this. We were just talking about IWRG. Understandably, I think Dragongate is a little tentative to send guys to Mexico right now. Last time it happened, didn't work out great. I want to see Daiki.
I mean, we're about to see Ryoya Tanaka go to the UK.
UK worked out fine. Mochizuki Jr. went viral for talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! Came back, was a great wrestler. He came back. That's what mattered. I want to see Daiki in Mexico so bad. I think he would crush it on an IWRG show.
I mean, yeah, like his ability is there, but I'm also like, no, I mean, this is a guy who's just now stepping up to Don Fuji, like baby steps.
Here's
baby
the thing.
steps.
All I'm saying, there is not a huge difference. And let me finish this sentence because it's important that I say the last name. There is not a huge difference between 2025 Daiki Yanagiuchi and Eita Kobayashi. That's all I'm saying.
Nope, that's a very valid point.
Very similar stylistically. Yeah. And I screamed in 2024. I said, this guy is good. I don't understand why they're not doing anything with him. And then they started doing the losing thing in Cork, and I was like, all right, this is very entertaining. I like this. He got saddled with Kato at the end of the year. I'm all for this. Daiki, so I'll go through it because I've got a list of guys I was most impressed with this weekend 1 through 8.
Okay.
With Kato obviously number 1.
Mm-hmm.
My number 2 is Akihiro Sahara. We'll talk about that. Put a pin in that. Mm-hmm. And then I would have Junior at 3 and Yanagiuchi at 4. And those guys are all really in one cluster. I like all those guys on the same tier. I would have Fuda and Tanaka and Rita, 5, 6, 7, 8. They're in their own tier. And then Homare, Homare did nothing wrong. He was just given nothing to do really in this tournament. I would have Homare at 8. But Daiki was where the big boys play. He was awesome in this tournament.
Yeah, and then the next night, him teaming with Masaki Mochizuki versus Don Fuji and Izushi Kanda.
It was great.
I went notebook on this match. This might end up being my small show of the year, this 119, a Kobe show. It starts with the Don Fuji is trying to get in the ring, but Daiki's barking at him, basically. Fuji tosses the chair into the ring. Masaki Mochizuki grabs the chair, opens it up, and shoves Daiki Yanagiuchi down in the seat, and Kobe Senbei Hall loses their minds.
I did not go notebook on it, but I get it. This match was an upper echelon sort of style of match that this was, of Don Fuji against Young Boys, and having Mochizuki in there is the interesting dynamic to make things a little bit more different. So I get it. I wasn't as high on it, but no pushback from me whatsoever.
But yeah, coming out of this weekend, Kato number 1 clearly. Number 2, Junior, just because of I felt like he did his big step being like the guy that's grounding a lot less experienced people on the roster in his matches. But Daiki really over the last 2 weeks, and I think like the immediate return on Mochizuki Dojo 2 is that like Daiki now feels like this new like threat of a wrestler. And then now Gate of Bayside, should we talk about the post match about Mochizuki Jr. and Kato here?
Let me make this point real quick, and then by all means, here's the thing, and it's just it's the way we have to judge this. Mochizuki Dojo, not Junior, Dojo, in its current existence has been around for only a few weeks, and Mike, Daiki Yanagiuchi has skyrocketed past Ryofuda in terms of who's been more impressive, and that is
easily.
I mean, and look, I've sold all my Fuda stock. It's not happening. I told Joe Lanza it's not happening, so it better not happen, or else I'll never hear the end of it. Yanagiuchi has been so impressive in 2025, and Sahara, who I'll talk about here in just a second after you talk about Bayside, I'm all aboard the Sahara train. He's not there yet, but I really like the potential that he's showing.
Yeah, so the victory reward for winning the Young Dragons Cup was going to be anything that the winner wants, according to GM Ryo Saito. Yoshiki Kato grabbed the microphone and said he wanted to end Mochizuki Dojo, and then afterwards, after some pushback, it's like, all right, we're going to make Gate of Bayside. We're going to take this and make it into now a captain's fall match with Yoshiki Kato and Daiki Yanaguchi as captains, where if Z-Brats wins, Mochizuki Dojo closes. It does not disband, but they will no longer team. And Masaki Mochizuki, if you look at what Jay was saying on Blue Sky, was like, yeah, you can shut down, but I can still help out these kids. So we already kind of have a little bit of like intrigue about this. Did Yoshiki Kato waste his shot trying to just demolish this like never unit, basically?
Yeah, I mean, this ends with Daiki rolling up Kato, I think.
I feel like that's what has to happen, yeah.
And while I would normally say, hey, Daiki's first win has to be in Korakuen, we're Tokyo adjacent on this show, and so I might not love it, but I'll allow it.
Right, and it's just like something that with Kato and with the way that he reacts towards Daiki and the other rookies, it makes a lot of sense that he is so frustrated with what happened with his generational peers that he sees the ones that came in after him, and he's like, nope, I don't like this whatsoever. Y'all need to figure this out yourselves.
Really impressive stuff. I'm all in on this. I'm really excited for that Bayside match because it's such a big opportunity for not only, the Kato, Homare, Ishin contingent, who by and large I think they've all proved themselves to some degree, but it's the biggest match of Sahara's career. It's the biggest match of Daiki's career. It's one of the biggest matches of Fuda's career. And Akihiro Sahara is the guy that I have to have eyes on in this match because they have dedicated so much time over the last few shows to just letting him be him. Mike, you reviewed the 16th show, the Korakuen show. That opening match was Fuji, Owashi, and Sahara against Mochizuki, Fuda, and Daiki Yanaguchi. Great angle after that match where Fuji went up to Sahara and was like, we're going to team together, right? And Sahara was like, no, I'm actually joining Mochizuki Dojo. Tremendous Don Fuji stuff there. But that whole match is a Sahara match. They just let him go in there with everybody and they let him try to figure his thing out. And then you go into Kobe, and once again, they're letting him figure his thing out. He had the opening match of the tournament. It was him and Homare, and it was a gimmick-heavy match. It was Homare-focused, but Sahara held up his end of the bargain. You kick off the 19th show, it's Junior versus Sahara. And once again, it's a match where Sahara had a lot of shine. I really liked what they did. Sahara is so explosive, and he reminds me a lot of of Daiki when he first debuted, where, okay, he doesn't have the natural, like, hey, this guy was great for match one that Tanaka had and Homare had, and to some degree, Ishin had, because I was so excited about Ishin and Riki Ihashi when they debuted. But he's gonna figure it out. As long as he stays healthy, as long as he gets reps, which he's getting reps now, he's gonna figure it out. I am so bullish on Sahara coming out of these shows.
Yeah, and that match he had against Mochizuki Jr. to open up the 119 show, you really got to see kind of the full package of Akihiro Sahara. And at least for me, I feel like with Junior, this is the strike guy that I want Junior to go up against. I mean, Sahara lit him up something fierce, and he walked into the later match of Kato with his chest already fully blistered, and it really like showed a level of presence, I would say, for Mochizuki Jr. in this match as well, for the fact that I was 3.25 stars in this match, and this was really, for all intents and purposes, I would say probably Mochizuki Jr.'s first real time like leading someone who is like this green through a match, and I thought that it was really like charming. I come away with like Sahara in a way a lot like how Ryoto Shimizu was.
Yeah,
like,
it's a great comp, absolutely.
And it's really, and it's not just because of body type in this, but there's a general charm to Sahara that he comes out and you're like, okay, here comes Sahara. He has a bit of a belly and he's kind of like a bowling ball and he's going to run through guys. And I want to see what he's trying to get out of his 3-point stance. He keeps on going for it. And so one time he got the spine buster and the other time it was after the spine buster. Intrigued to see what it could do. But yeah, he really showed a lot for someone who just has not had that level of ring time and really a level of focus towards him that Sahara being in this match, like I'm stoked to see Sahara versus Ishin. I want to see how that's going to go for him. Like there's a lot with him, and I think you contrast that with what happened with the lower tier guys, the guys who were eliminated mostly on the first night. That you come out of like the two performances, and you're like, oh wow, Sahara really feels like someone that, you know, like he's not going to be an instant play like Yoshiki Kato, or Yoshiki Kato, as soon as there was established time for Yoshiki Kato could stay healthy, he was going to get this push. He's the one that you invest in and you wait to see how he kind of grows up. And I mean, the Akihiro Sahara we see now is not going to be the Akihiro Sahara we're going to see in 3 years or like after Excursion, but I'm really fascinated to see how he progresses from there.
He's such an interesting foil when you compare him to Kato, where especially what we know about Kato is this guy wants to be a babyface, and everybody's like, but you can't, you see, you're terrifying. You're a menace to society. You can't be a babyface. And Sahara is of a similar size and of an even wider build than Kato, and it's kind of a lovable oaf. It's why the Shimizu comp works great. I'm sure there'll be a time where we see Sahara turn heel, and it'll be an effective one, but being able to be that gentle giant is a real strength, and Sahara seems to have that so early in his career.
Yeah, it's just a level of chemistry and really, I guess, charisma that you can't teach someone, I feel like.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the bottom end. Didn't get much of Hamare, as you said, in this tournament. Kind of really, you noticed on these shows how popular he already is, especially from like the crowd calls were going wild in Kobe about this, but it just was not going to be a tournament that was like booked around him. I mean, it kind of was a match between these two that on that first night that fell apart a little bit right before the DQ on super kicking Mr. Nakagawa, but it just was not really going to be his tournament. It became very clear.
I felt like they were going to do that with either Hamare or Kato, and I wasn't sure which one they were going to do that with, and it ended up being Hamare, which in hindsight makes sense. It's no indictment of him. I actually got a note from somebody saying that Kato and Hamare have developed a real heartthrob sort of bad boy connection with the crowd, so he's fine. This is no indictment of him. The booking, I don't think, would have worked with Hamare and Kato in the semifinals. They sacrificed one of them. They sacrificed the younger guy. It was the right move.
And then you have Ryoya Tanaka and Rita, two such known quantities that I feel like it actually, for Mochizuki Jr., he gets the win over someone who has been kind of, I would say, on his level, maybe without like the title wins that Mochizuki Jr. had. And he was able to get a solid win after a great scrap, and where Rita just kind of becomes the victim of Gate of Bayside in the booking there, where he loses his first round match. Minnow Lee come out and lay him out, and they pull Fuda on top of him, where Fuda does not look good coming out of it, but you can't really say that anything was lost for Rita along the way as well.
No, and I get it. They want to feed the Mochizuki Dojo guys to Kato, but Rita should have beat Fuda. They should have done Kato and Rita in the semifinals.
Yeah, and it kind of like looking at how it was like booked back, you probably could have had a similar level match that you got at Mochizuki Jr. and Ryoya Tanaka if you didn't have the run-ins and making this a plot device match.
Yeah, I mean, look, this was a very good week of shows, but a week of shows with a lot of capital H heat, and that was apparent. I wrote in my Corkin review on the 15th that through the first half of that show, saw a lot of Coach Minoura, just a lot of Coach Minoura being a bad guy. And at some point, I was like, all right, I got it. Yep, it is clear. I'll see you at Gate of Bayside, my friend.
Yeah, I'm kind of tired of Kota Minoura as a bad guy.
And it's just like,
it's just
you
not
know,
there.
he's well, it's like I can't tell if he's there or not, because I guess
Maybe he figures it out, I guess.
but he's of it's so interesting, this guy, where it's like, okay, and again, on record, giant Minoru fan through halfway through 2024. But he's in Mochizuki Dojo to start his career, which was objectively the best part of that era of Dragongate outside of maybe Maximum. And then he joins Dragongate Generation, has the tag team with Jason Lee. It's good. Stumbles into Masquerade. Objectively, the best part of that era of Dragongate. Flops as the leader of Gold Class. Ben K has to save him. Rita saves him. Whole big thing. Now he's in Z-Brats. And in theory, he's in the best angle in the company and the thing that I'm most invested in. But it's Jason and Jackie and Rita that I am super invested in. And Minoru's also there.
Yeah, and I think that that's like the one thing about Z-Bratz being so big that kind of hurts. It just hurts him uniquely because he's able to kind of drift in there and just be like that. Oh yeah, no, he is Jason Lee's tag team partner. Mino Lee has this history, and then you have like, oh, and then you look at the rest of the unit, and you're like, okay, Ishin's doing interesting things. Kai has a notable match going on at the pay-per-view, and even though Kota Minoura, objectively a successful wrestler, he feels like the least important person of his unit.
Yeah, and I don't know what you do with that. You know, I don't really like the fact that he is looking and acting like 2018 Eita, because that's just a time when I really did not enjoy Eita, and where Pac, you know, much like Minoura, you know, Pac completely bailed out Eita because I think he was gonna, you know, completely flop as a lead heel, and then Pac came in and saved the day, and so Eita was able to sort of play this 1B thing up until Pac left, and then by that point we were en route to Eita winning the Dreamgate, which ended up working out. But yeah, I don't know what you do with him. I mean, look, he could be in a match of the year on Saturday, and we could come on here Tuesday and go, yeah, I just not sold on Kota Minoura yet. You know, don't know what to do with him. And that's just a weird position to be in.
Yeah, it just objectively feels weird about that. Any other big Young Dragon Cup notes you had before we talk about the rest of these Kobe shows?
No, not Young Dragons Cup. I mean, you know, the finals is really, really good. I would highly recommend watching that.
Mm-hmm.
The tournament is quick. I mean, you could skip the other stuff on these Kobe shows and watch at least the second round matches. The matches on the 19th, I think, are really worth watching. But, you know, these Kobe shows, I don't have a ton to say on them. Other than that, I thought they continued what has been an exceptional build to Gate of Bayside.
Yeah, and I feel like we could get through these real quick and then use this to talk about Bayside. You look at what happened on the 18th, and you have Daya Kakuta and Hyo versus kind of the heavyweight contingent of Z-Brass. It was kind of an Ishin show, but you got a hip-assisted double cork out of a Rana. That was kind of a fun finish you had there. Ben and Kamei versus Shun and Jason Lee, I felt like was the best match on that show, to be honest. But
Yes.
That was all pretty much like building up the Twin Gate match, and in the main event, you've had like this real fun build over this last week as coming out of Yamato versus Shun Skywalker, where Strong Machine J feels very emboldened and very powerful at this moment, where Yamato is still very much like wrestling like he's recovering from the match he has with Shun. We had on Shun Skywalker on the 15th. You saw that on the show on the 16th, that main event there, that my review is up on Voices of Wrestling. But you also saw it basically all the way through the entire week, where this has just now become a fact that when you look at like the Dreamgate, like there's now this open question, I feel like, at least with like the shows that we've seen it, where you get to see that this big legitimate question of, is 10 days enough for Yamato to kind of recover after it feels like that Strong Machine J and all the lead up has been able to basically get him at maybe his weakest so far this run.
So I've talked to a few different people at Bayside, and there's people that think Strong Machine J should win this match. What do you think about that?
I think that we have created a level of doubt for Strong Machine J or for Yamato enough that Yamato feels like that he can really overcome here. And I'm not getting away from my prediction that Strong Machine J is going to be beat like a drum in this building for the next few years. So it hasn't changed anything for me, but I just think that this is just a strong bit of booking and build.
That's where I'm at. Is I sent a note to somebody in the wrestling media today that was just like, hey, here's the deal. Dragongate has had a really, really strong January, and they've built to this pay-per-view really, really well, where it doesn't feel like it's the cheap hometown title defense, and that was really the only build there. And the Twin Gate match doesn't feel thrown together. And they've done enough interesting stuff with the Triangle Gate match where I'm really invested. And then you also have the Z-Brats Mochizuki Dojo thing that sounds pretty cool. There's just a lot going on here. Strong Machine J in 2025 has been a great pro wrestler. He looks better than he ever has. He's wrestling better than he ever has. He's been getting rave reviews on his promos. I don't know if you've heard that, Mike, but Strong Machine J is getting rave reviews on his promos. And it's perfect. All they are doing is doing what they did with Dragon Dia and Ishin and to some degree Kakuta, where they have just built up a really, really strong challenger for Yamato. And at the end of the day, Yamato should beat him. And here's why. It has nothing to do with Strong Machine J. Under different circumstances, I would say, hey, maybe give him a shot here, nice feeling, whatever. There's no guarantee Yamato has another Dreamgate match or another Dreamgate reign after this one. He's already had 6 reigns. It's 2 more than anybody else. If a 7th reign happens, there's no guarantee that he's going to feel as hot and have as much momentum as he does right now. I like Strong Machine J. I think Strong Machine J will be a Dreamgate champion one day. Very, very bullish on him as a main eventer. You cannot rip the Band-Aid off this Yamato title run this early for Strong Machine J. It just does not make any sense. When you look at the rest of the roster, Mike, these are just spouting off the top of my head. Yamato still has a defense left in him against KZ, against Shun, against Minoura, a break glass in case of emergency Kai defense, Kato, Jason, maybe Gianni Valletta, Mochizuki Jr. on that list. Susumu, Yoshioka if he ever gets healthy. Throw Tanaka on that list just because. Masaki Mochizuki on that list just because. Luis Mate on that list. Shuji Kondo just because. Yamato's reign shouldn't end anytime soon. This should go down in the same way of the Ishin match and the Dia match, where we leave this going, wow, that challenger was so much better in that match than I thought they were going to be. They exit this match better than the position they came in with, and credit to Yamato, what a champion. And that is the only result that should be in play here.
Yeah, I just keep on going back to the idea that this is going to be the real run for Yamato. And I mean, Strong Machine J, I mean, we've seen him like take those steps up. It just does not feel like, even though he has been booked very strong and he's really made those steps that to be that main event player, going from being like the unarguably the lowest person of the big 6 to this point to where he is right now at this point. I just don't think you are at a point with him where you are going to sacrifice this kind of run from Yamato for that. And because of that, it just, I really want this to kind of have the same feeling as some of those defenses in the Pac Ring, where you know that the big problem that you had during the Pac Ring was, you have these open questions and these untested stars that you want to kind of get them to that level. They need to have matches like this. Strong Machine J needs to have a strong hometown title match before you're really able to go, all right, full bore with Strong Machine J. So I think that all that they have really done is what you should be doing for your world title programs across all of wrestling, case. And that is, you need to basically build up the challenger to, at any time, someone can go like, oh my gosh, Strong Machine J can win this. And they've done this through the last 10 days through the booking of Yamato, going like, hey, Yamato is coming in really wounded. Who's to say that he's able to recover as fast as he would want to for this title match? That's just good booking. That's not necessarily making a guy. That's just making your title feel more important in my mind.
As I said last week, I like how they've really leaned into making Yamato the definitive heel in this match, and I think Jay has the chance to get a really, really large reaction in his hometown. It's look that they're firing all cylinders right now. This is a really this is a Kobe world quality level Dreamgate build, I feel, and it's for Gate of Bayside. It's worked out great.
And I feel like that same care moving down the card continues with the Open the Twin Gate title match. Minnow Lee, Jason Lee, and Kota Minoura make their defense against kind of the two guys who've been tied to Jason Lee and Kota Minoura basically for the last 4 years, and for Rita for his entire career, really. Jackie Kamei and Rita, we get to see the next stage and Z-Brats versus Gold Class happen at Gate of Bayside, a building where Jackie Kamei and Jason Lee had one of the best matches of the year last year.
Here is the unfortunate proposition that these guys have been placed in, is that this is officially, before they even hit the ring, a match of the year contender. And I think anything less would be a slight disappointment. But what we've seen from Jason and Jackie, and what we know Rita's capable of, and Minoura on his best night, what he can do, this is, again, it's almost like a Kobe World Twin Gate match where you have to start the bidding at 4.5 stars. It feels like that sort of match. And again, I would be stunned and I would be disappointed if by the time we talk next week, we're like, yeah, 4 stars, moving on. It has to have a certain level of pizzazz to it, a certain level of greatness to it, or else I think it's going to be a disappointment. And that's a terrible way to approach any sort of match. It's an unfair position to put anybody in, but it's Jason Lee and Jackie Kamei and Rita in a Twin Gate match, and thus it has those expectations. Forget what they've done so far this year, which has been otherworldly. Just those 3 names alone in this setting, that's the expectation.
Yeah, and you get this big aspect of, all right, this might be a me thing, but my turn radar with Jackie Kamei is just going overdrive. If this guy doesn't show up in new gear, I think he's turning.
Oh, funny. See,
Bayside.
mine's gone down.
Oh, I think that this could finally be Shun getting the person he's always wanted into Z-Brats. You know, it just... Kamei missing lines and passing it off like it was like an intentional joke kind of thing makes me kind of feel like that I'm sorry, my radar, it has been pinging on a Jackie Kamei heel turn ever since this year started, and I feel like that the expectations here for especially a Twin Gate match with these individuals are well founded, but there's a part of me that's going like, I think that the output or the outcome might not be that match, because looking at this match or looking at this show, it feels like that there's a lot of points that we might get some heel turns or Z-Brats shenanigans. And I can't discount that with this match.
So you're under the assumption that Z-Brats will retain because of possible Kamei heel shenanigans. I'm under the assumption Z-Brats will retain, but they will do so in dominant fashion.
Yeah. No, I think Z-Brats retains one way or another out of this.
Yeah, good. I'm looking forward to it.
And the third of the traditional big title matches on this show, Paradox, BB Hulk, Susumu Yokosuka, and Kagetora make their first Triangle Gate defense against the D-Courage team of Dragon Dia, Madoka Kakuta, and Ryo Tanaka. Case, D-Courage is finally going for the Triangle Gate title. Like, after 3 years where they have won everything else, this has been the one thing left dangling for them about where does D-Courage really rate amongst all-time units until they get... This is the one last thing on their checklist, and it might be happening this weekend.
Yeah, I love that in theory, but I'm weirdly invested in this Paradox team, and for no reason other than I think they're going to keep them dominant for a little bit, I think Paradox is going to retain.
Yeah, and I think you look at this for the Paradox team, and you have 3 guys on the roster, and especially when you look at Kagetora and BB Hulk, that when you give them something that they can sink their teeth into, that's really the best form of them possible. And especially with BB Hulk, especially since his face turn, we have seen him really kind of fill this great role in Triangle Gate teams that it does make me a little hesitant to take this belt away from a Paradox team. And then you have Susumu Yokosuka there being Susumu Yokosuka, and there's a lot to like about this Paradox team and the belief that you can try to keep them strong through it. I just like looking at like if D Courage wins the Triangle Gate belts, that might be a signal that D Courage might be closing up shop soon too.
That's
so
true.
That's another reason to kind of keep them on the chase.
Yeah, no, I can see that, but I'm gonna side with Paradox on this one.
We have a special hardcore match, Kai versus Masato Tanaka. This was built after Kai basically ran down Tanaka on the 16th and basically going like, it's in my hometown. Why are we doing this match? This is a bald tan guy that used to be a name. And Ryo Saito then brought out Masato Tanaka that says, if that's what you're thinking, how about we make this a hardcore match? So that's our special singles match happening with an outsider at Bayside. Kai, the Yokohama native, going up against 0-1's Masato Tanaka in a hardcore match.
Masato Tanaka's history in Dragongate is brief. He's had 9 total matches going back to 2008 when he and Tetsuhiro Kuroda beat Don Fuji and Masaki Mochizuki at a Gate of Generation show at Oda Ward Gymnasium in Tokyo. Notably, he showed up at Kobe World 2015. It was Tanaka and Shingo against Shimizu and BB Hulk in a match that I quite like. And then he wrestled again at World 18 in a Triangle Gate match against Natural Vibes. He teamed up with Antias. It was Tanaka, Takashi Yoshida, and Yasushi Kanda representing the worst unit of all time. We've seen him. We saw him 2 years ago on the Mochizuki Produce shows. He wrestled a series of tags there. He's always fun, and this is Kai's hometown. You knew he was going to have a big match, and I'm kind of glad he's not shoehorned into a Triangle Gate match somewhere. I think this could be short and painless, or it could over-deliver, and I don't know which one it's going to be.
Yeah, and I think like the key aspect of giving Kai something important to do in his hometown can't be overstated. And yeah, I remember that Antios, like that was like a Triangle Gate tournament that they had at Kobe World one year, and after everyone left, Tanaka was like, yeah, I guess I'm technically an assistant for Antios for the next few weeks. And then he did Kobe World and it was never to be seen in an Antios t-shirt ever again.
And I believe that was a deal where I think he had a 0-1 show that night. So they had to put that, because the tournament was 2017. This was 2018, I think. Let me double check that. Yes. Okay. So this was just a deal where the Triangle Gate match was third on the card. And everybody was very annoyed by it because it was World 2018 and everybody was annoyed by everything. And it sucked that Tanaka was there. And then he had this weird undercard Triangle Gate match because he had to leave and I think work a 0-1 show that same night.
Yeah, that does seem like something that would have happened in the summer of 2018.
Yep.
Then we have the Captain's Fall Z-Brats versus Mochizuki Jr. or Mochizuki Dojo, pardon me. 8-man tag. Your captains are Daiki Yanagiuchi and Yoshiki Kato. I think we're both kind of expecting that this might be the place where we get to see the first ever direct fall for Daiki Yanagiuchi over Kato.
I think that's the only logical result here. I said it earlier. I think we're getting the roll-up finish on Kato. I have very high expectations for this. I really hope they all go out there and kill it.
Yeah, and for me, at least, I've loved the fact that now Z-Brats is at a size where, okay, you have the Z-Brats and Gold Class feud, and a lot of that's based more around Kota Minoura, Jason Lee, and those two, and then you're able to plug in Shun and Ishin wherever you want to, but you also have Z-Brats now in this feud led by Kato and Hamare that's happening. And I think that that's just something that we have missed with the heel units not necessarily being the biggest thing in recent years, especially with RED and sometimes with Z-Brats. Yes, it does mean you do get a lot more kind of heel interference and like some of those DQ matches that we saw at Kobe, but I think that I'd rather have that and the heel unit doing a lot of interesting things than just like, oh, it's a 4-person heel unit and they can only do one match on a show.
This has clearly worked out for the best. This should be the template going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So, template going forward, I don't know if that's the case with the Aware Gate title. The new champion winning it at January 16th against Lingerie Muto is Takashi Yoshida, and he will be making his first defense against Kikutaro here, Case.
Make it quick.
Yep. Match 2, that's our get everyone onto the card special. Ultimo, Shuji Kondo, Hyo, Toru Owashi, and Naruki Doi versus Kinki Horiguchi, Don Fuji, Sachihoko Boy, Yasushi Kanda, and Luis Monte. They have Luis Monte and Hyo on opposite sides of a match, and I feel like that's pretty notable given how they've kind of kept them really kind of apart since the end of Big Hug. Like, they weren't on opposing sides, like, at all.
Yeah, I'm still of the belief that they're going to end up teaming with each other again, so I think for now we'll keep them separated until they have something official to do. It's a fun-looking hodgepodge of guys. This could be a fun match number 2.
Yeah, we've been seeing a lot, I feel like, out of this veteran side of the roster over the last few weeks, in more fun manners than I feel like than we usually get to, especially like Don Fuji getting involved with Mochizuki Dojo stuff, Shuji Kondo getting that match against Benkei, Naruki Doi just kind of existing, and I mean, Toru Owashi, now we have about, I guess, 2.5 months left of his full-time career. It's a real kind of fun thing to see. We even got Super Shenlong 2 showing back up at Kobe. It's just nice to kind of see that this is where like the veterans side of this is on the roster right now.
No, I agree. Obviously having the young guys helps, but you're now at a point where when you have Fuda and Yanagiuchi and Sahara and Ishin and Kato and Hamara, they're now taking up valuable spots on the roster, and you have Kagetora and Susumu and Hulk over delivering. So you end up finding yourself with now Doi in this match, and Hyo in this match, and Monte in this match, and Fuji, who's been great in 2025 in this match. And it just means there's depth here. It's kind of the reoccurring theme as I did a podcast with Fred Moreland and the podcast with Joe Lanza last week. The one thing I hit on over and over again was there's just a lot of depth in this company right now, and you can really see it here in this 10-man tag.
Yeah, and I mean, case in point, the opener of this show, Gold Class versus Natural Vibes, Benkei and Mochizuki Jr. versus KZ and UT. Maybe this is just me having fond memories of that Twin Rio run with KZ and UT, but I feel like that this is maybe right as we get into Rey de Pareja season, seeing like 2 of the potential top teams open up this big show.
No, this is going to be awesome. I can't wait for this.
Yep, and that is Gate of Bayside. It's coming on the 25th this weekend. Big show, the end of Dragongate's busiest January of all time. I think it's pretty fair to say, in case we'll be back next week to talk all about that. Anything else you were wanting to touch on before we got out of here this week?
No, that's it.
All right, so you could follow us at Open VoiceGate on social media. You can also talk with us in the Voices of Wrestling Discord. We have a Open the VoiceGate channel where we do the show postings, and whenever we do rewind and rewatch, we make sure that the match lists and all of that is posted there. There's also the Dragongate channel, which given the news today and then probably throughout the rest of this week will be a pretty fun place to talk about all the comings and goings in Dragongate going forward. You could also follow us on Twitter at Open VoiceGate. Case is at _ in your case. I'm at Fujiheya. Thanks for listening to Open VoiceGate. We'll be back with you next week. Take care, everyone.
Do you like wrestling trivia? Then check out the 5-Star Match Game, the Pro Wrestling Quiz Show. I'm Joe Gagney. In every episode, I grill 3 contestants with 5 rounds of power-packed wrestling trivia. We have over 30 evergreen episodes in the archives covering WWE, AEW, Japan, Mexico, and much, 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 much more. Play along at home and check it out today.